Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Not Off Limits podcast. Now, it's been a really long time, guys. It's maybe probably been over a year since I did a podcast, but a lot of life has happened since then. I've moved, gotten married, just so many good things that have happened. But today, I'm joined by a guest in our relaunch of Not Off Limits podcast, and none other than my mother, Veronica Cornejo. So she's just going to tell us a couple things about herself, and then we'll get right into the podcast.
What would you like to know?
Okay. What's a fun fact? A fun fact that isn't what we're going to talk about today.
Oh Lord. Fun fact. Let's see. Fun fact. I like to draw.
Yeah, she
Okay.
does. Yeah,
Okay.
she does. I still
I need to get back into it.
yeah.
Yes.
A fun fact for that fun fact is I actually have a lot of like her paintings from when she made in like middle school and high school. Even like a couple of like the sculptures too. I use as like one of my ring holders. But yeah, today we're joined by my mom, and we're gonna be talking about her new book. And she's just gonna tell us a little bit just about the book, and then we'll go right into it from there.
All right. So the book is called Unshackled, a teen mom finding unstoppable freedom, and it officially launched completely in all the versions on January the 31st. So it's out on Amazon. And it's about my testimony, my story of being a teen mom and just seeing all the things that God did in and through all my broken pieces.
Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but before she even did a podcast, she was on the Not Off Limits podcast talking about like this book idea. I really don't think when we first talked about it, it wasn't like super well formed. You weren't in that like literature school yet, like the author school. Um, so it's been a long time coming. And like I said, that podcast probably was maybe like a year and a half ago, probably 2 years ago now. So now it's like a full circle moment of like now you're doing it. What would you say like what was the reason that you wanted to write the book? Because I know you mentioned before in our other podcast, and just she's been on other podcasts, guys. Um, she said she's not a writer. She doesn't really write a lot. Doesn't really read books a lot. So like, why write a book?
Yeah, it was something that God had placed in my heart when we moved here. And I think when we did this podcast, like we had just kind of moved, we were in our condo, and even settling in that space, I knew that God was telling me to write a book, but I didn't know where to start. And yeah, I never saw myself as a writer, but I had always journaled. So I knew that I was able to reflect on my past. Like those were things that I've always done. Didn't realize that God would use it for a book. Um, but the reason for the book was more, it was really like I don't know, it was like something that I guess just happened in me, that God did in me when He moved us here. And it was the sense of like, I have seen a full circle in my family and I do not want to stay quiet anymore. And so, what does that look like? And I felt like God was like, it needs to be a book. Um, yeah. And it kind of went on this journey of that and took a year to write. And then the next year, I used it to learn what it would look like to publish a book because I had no idea. So took a course in that and learned all the things, and I self-published it.
So it's pretty awesome. I want to go back to like something that you said. You said that you didn't want to be quiet about it anymore. I know, like my if you guys don't know my mom, she is pretty introverted. She can be really shy when it comes to like certain scenarios and things. And I feel like the book that you've written is like very bold and like it just talks about your story, and like your story is literally so crazy, just so crazy. Um, and you've just experienced a lot of life for like being someone like so young. And I would like you to kind of like just touch on like how that felt to share your story, because I'm sure it can be like very vulnerable. Like even when I'm like doing things creatively, like writing songs or just creating something that like's coming from my heart, I feel very vulnerable about sharing it, and it's like pretty scary. So like, how did that look like for you, or how does that still look like for you?
Mm-hmm. I guess I'll go backwards a little bit. I think for a long time, even though I was like a part of the church and at one point I was on staff in Maryland, I still felt like shame of my story. I would share it with people that I felt comfortable sharing it with, but I don't think that it was something that I shared pretty often or didn't really share up front. Like if someone asked me, great, it came up. If not, like I just didn't speak about it. And it had a lot to do with like the shame of like being a teen mom and like how old my kids were and then having to get into that and why they were old as they were and they were looking at me like, "Oh, how do you have a, teenager? That makes no sense. You look like a teenager." And so just having those conversations, I felt like I always avoided them. And then moving, I really did feel like, okay, no, like God just really reminded me, it's like, you shouldn't be ashamed of what I've done. Like, you need to speak about it. And there's just been so much fruit, like through your life, right? Like watching you grow into this very wonderful lady and just doing things boldly. You have this podcast and you've done so much more. You've written a poem book and like you're just so bold with who you are and what God wants to do in you. And so I felt like, yeah, like who am I to stay quiet? People need to hear my story, and whoever hears it, it's for that one person that God is wanting me to share this story for.
Yeah, it's good. I want to kind of go off of that. You said that it's for that one person that needs to hear your story. Just a quick recap like of the story. It's basically she was a teen mom starting at the age of 16, and the book mentions a lot more details than that. Just a lot of things that I feel like I didn't know, and I feel like you probably didn't share with other people as well. So I love that, and they're really hard subjects to like just talk about, like even in a non-Christian community standpoint, like just in general, just like life that happens to people. I would really like you just to talk about what. Well, actually, let me go back.
Do you have a specific question?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay.
Yeah, specific question. So I know the proceeds of your book aren't actually going to you. They're going to certain places and certain people. I want you to kind of like explain the heart behind that.
Yeah, when I started the journey of writing, I knew immediately that like whatever I was gonna do with the book was not gonna be for me. And I started to think, okay, God, like what can I do creatively with this book that I can somehow not just share my story, but like what else can I do with it? Like, like you said with the proceeds, like I thought, okay, what am I gonna do with this money? Like I would like to give it back to moms that need it. Young moms that are wanting to have a family and are struggling, and why not give to organizations that are helping moms? Because I know I benefited from things like that, and my heart was to give back.
That's good. Specifically like on teen moms, like what is like a piece of advice that you would give to someone that's like walking through that right now? And I know there's like a lot of shame behind like just being a teen mom just because of like the culture we live in. The culture we live in is just like so cancel culture, like anything that like a majority of people don't approve of, like it's not okay and it's not accepted. But I think recently in years we've kind of like strayed away from that, and we've kind of accepted a lot of things that shouldn't be okay. And that is okay now, and I think it's resulted like just in a lot of identity issues, and I know there could just be so much like shame attached to that, and just like that, as especially like as a teenage girl like in society, what is like just a piece of advice you would give to like someone that is maybe walking through that, or just maybe like considering like choices that like could lead up to like something like that?
I would say, so I think being a teen mom, the getting there was a sin, right? But then I think, what about all the other sins, like drugs or addictions, just other types of sins that are out in the world? They're also sins. And my sin was one that everyone could see. Like it wasn't one I could put under the rug. I couldn't hide it. So I knew it was a different level like of something that I needed to walk through. And I would say like we are called to be there for people. We are called to help them get healing from whatever they're walking through, giving them a chance if they want it, and if they're looking for a better, like healing process, whatever that is. Like I feel like we're called to be the hands and feet to help people walk through healing. Like what does that look like? How do we walk alongside somebody to help them heal from the things that they've done, right? um I think that there's two different types of like ways that you could go. Like you could go the way where you are choosing to stay where you are, you're choosing to continue in your sin. And then there's another way where you're like, I want to get out of this. I want to do better. I want to make better decisions. And so, how do we come alongside the people that want to do better? Do we create a space for them in the church? Like, are we welcoming, just keeping all those things in mind? I think just looking at everyone as a person that God loves. Like, I'm a daughter, right? Yeah, looking at everyone with love.
Yeah, that's good. Speaking about that healing like journey, and I know like you mentioned, like it's just taken a while to get there. Even like here, like we're in Charlotte. Even here, like you've just written a book about it, and like I'm sure that's like a really big part of like your healing journey, and just like seeing me and like my siblings Julian and like Matthew just like do life. But I want to kind of start at that beginning of that healing journey. You grew up Catholic, and it wasn't like a really like religious Catholic. It was just like, oh, like probably once a year, I'm assuming like Easter, Christmas, and then Hispanic Catholic. If you're a Hispanic Catholic, you know. I'm not even gonna explain it. But if you're a Hispanic Catholic, you know. And then after you had me, you were going to a church in Maryland. Do you feel like that church really like accepted you, and you just like still felt that shame, or like how did that look like just initially walking into those doors and being like, oh, I'm a teen mom and like I'm here at church?
Yeah. I would say that I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the church that we went to and where you guys grew up in. I did feel accepted. I didn't feel that I was being judged. And I think that that's why we stayed there. That's why you guys kept going there. That's why eventually God even opened a door for us to be on staff there. Like that was crazy, right? To not be seen as a teen mom, but to be seen for the gifts that we would be bringing to the kingdom and how we would add value in the spaces that the church was allowing us to be a part of. And I mean, that was an overflow. I think the fact that we got an open door at the church opened opportunities for our kids, right? Like for you and the love that I think that now you have for the church. If it wasn't for that, we none of us would be where we are right now. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the open doors, and I think that I was received with love. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like specifically for me, since the book is about me,
That's fair.
the church that we went to in Maryland, I feel the same way. Like when I tell people like just about like you, they're like, "Oh my God, your mom is so young," like, and it's like a whole explanation that I kind of have to go through. But every time like I think back to like when we first started going to Redeemer, it's called Church of Redeemer. Um, I felt accepted too, and I think too for the longest time, like I knew that like you were like judged from like outside of the church, like you just know like when somebody's like judging you or your family, you just know. So I felt like at a young age I kind of knew that. I was like, oh, like they don't like my mom because of this, and it wasn't like anything bad. I was just very aware of it. But I feel like when we started going to the church, like nobody it wasn't even a thought that was like, oh, you're disqualified because you're a teen mom. And I think too, like I was a really troubled kid like in middle school, and I think everybody in church, they never gave up on me. Like they surrounded me like with such like utmost love, and like they still valued me and they still thought of me as a leader, which is like absolutely crazy, which is so crazy. But I was never disqualified because of like just the things that I was going through. And I think because they knew like where you started from, they just had so much sympathy for me. It wasn't pity, it was just like sympathy of like, I understand what you're going through generationally, and like how can I come alongside you. And so just kind of going off of that, how how do you feel like just watching the generational chains like break off of your children, like from generation to generation?
It's at times it's overwhelming. I mean, it's beautifully overwhelming, I think. especially with you, I feel like for you, it's like
Too
you do
much.
one thing after another. It's like, wow, all these milestones, can we celebrate? And then it's like another milestone is coming right around the corner. And it's been an it's a beautiful, overwhelming feeling. Like, I'm just like, wow, God, you are just so good. The way that He's used all of you, it's been beautiful to watch. And it's for me personally, like as your mom, it's been like I've been able to see what my life may have been, right? If I would have had God in my life earlier, and to see the fruit. Like I've been able to even, I feel like I've lived through your emotions too, and through the things that you've celebrated, accomplished. I feel like I've been able to really put myself in your shoes. And for me, that's like God's grace. Like He's redeemed a lot of parts that I missed out on, right?
Yeah.
Because of my decisions. And yeah, it's been beautiful.
Yeah, it's good. I think for me, like, my perspective on that is, like, I don't feel like it's a lot. I feel like, I don't know. Maybe, I think it's just the way that God made me. I just, like, feel like, man, I could be doing so much more than I am right now. Which is crazy because, like, God has, like, just done so much, like, through my life, which is great. But I think it's just, like, a testament of, like, the generational things that have been broken. And he's like, man, like you went through this, like I'm just gonna bless you abundantly for that. And like it's just so evident. But going back to the book, I kind of want to talk about like, is there a specific part of the book that was just really hard to write, like that you just sat down and you were like, man, I didn't know if I should put this in this book, but people really need to hear this, like any part?
Yeah. I'm not going to say specifically what part because you got to get the book to find out, but
Right.
I'm going to say that there was a part in there that I honestly, it was kind of out of nowhere. One day I was driving and just kind of felt in my heart that I was supposed to share this part of my life that no one knew but like my husband and my mom and my sister. No one else knew,
Not
right?
me.
Not even, yeah, you, exactly. But I was just like, this is, one thing I've kind of gone back onto is like, okay, God, if you're asking me to share something, it's because I've learned something. It's because you got me through it, right? Like, what is the thing that I learned through that situation? And I did feel like I had learned something. So for me, that was like the confirmation, like, okay, Lord, if you want this to go in there, you're gonna give me the words to say it. You're gonna give me the strength to write it. And yeah, it's got to be like a full circle moment for it to even go in the book. And it's been really freeing. I've had like conversations about it with people. I've met people that experience something similar, and I've been able to relate with different people because I shared that.
Yeah, that's good. I think like my perspective versus like other people's perspective, like I lived through it. So like me and Julian, like just our entire family, like I think too, like it's so easy for people just to like look at the outside and just think they know things from the inside. Um, but like God's grace has just been so good like to our family. And I think that you've like led our home very well. And specifically there's this part of the book where Matthew's been on the podcast before. He kind of, I call him my brother, but technically he's my uncle. But the technicality is that he's related to my dad. They're brothers.
Adopted.
They're brothers, and then our family adopted him after their mom had passed, my grandma, from cancer. And I just want you to kind of like talk about Matthew. Like, how did that? I know for me, I'll talk about me first.
Yeah.
I know for me, it was like, oh, I think it was really rough for me. Like, just, I think I'm not that good at change. So I think when he first moved in, it was really hard. I think, too, I'm very opinionated. So I gave a lot of opinions that they didn't need. But also, too, like, Dad was away, like, all the time because, like, his mom was sick. So, like, he would stay over at their house. And then Matthew, like, wouldn't really talk to any of us. Now Matthew's, like, the most talkative person ever. But I think it was just really hard because, like, we were all experiencing, like, a sort of loss. Which it really was a loss. But I don't think it was we didn't go through it as hard as like my dad did and Matthew did. I think for them it was really hard, and like nobody knows how to like go alongside someone when it comes to grief. like, especially not like a 15, 16-year-old girl. Like, how do you, like, okay, now a person is living in your house, now they're taking your room, and now they're like, there's so many, like, so much change. Yeah, and I just want you to talk about, like, how that felt for you personally, like, just coming to that realization of, like, oh, wow, now we're going to take on, like, another kid.
Yeah. I think at first there was a lot of fear of the unknown, of what it was going to look like having Matthew living with us, right? And what the adjustments would look like, what, Matthew didn't really go to church like we did. We were on staff, and you guys grew up in the church. Like every Sunday we were there, unless someone was sick or in the hospital. But other than that, we were at church, and he was not used to that family flow. And I think I wasn't sure. Like I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. I wasn't sure how he was going to react with everything and how he was going to adjust. But like you said, it was hard at first. There was a lot of like, we also didn't know like how to approach and how to come alongside him. But I do believe that because we included God in this process, like the Holy Spirit really did lead us in certain ways, and led us to realize certain things that were taking place, and led us to know when to have the right conversations and when to like ask certain things to make sure that everyone was okay. At one point, like we realized, okay, we need to have conversations with the whole family. We need to include everyone in what we're doing and what the changes are happening. And I think moving, it really did something beautiful, like that we didn't realize it would. Like us moving from Maryland to Charlotte was a new start. Like it was a new start as a family, which is what we felt like. It was like we were starting over as a family of 5.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah, family of 5, and moving was kind of like this journey of like, ooh, this is new for all of us now. Like we're going into the state that we've never been in together. Like we're experiencing this thing together, and we're starting over together. And I think that really brought a lot of healing to all of us.
Yeah.
And we needed it, and we just didn't know. But the obedience of like moving and doing all the things that God was placing in our hearts to do to get here was exactly what we needed.
Yeah, I think too, like, I remember, like, I was moving to Florida because I was going to college in Florida. So it was really kind of just the 4 of them. But I think because it was just the 4 of them, it just made a stronger family dynamic. I feel like for me, it's just like, oh, okay, like, I've lived with you all my life, I'll be alright, you know? And, like, me and Matthew, like, too, we're just so alike. So, like, we just kind of have, like, that instant, like, okay, we click.
He kind of took your place while you were gone.
Yeah, we're so alike that he literally took my place. Literally, we were just too alike. And I think because
Same birthday,
literally same birthday.
twins.
Yeah, I think, and I always tell people too this. And this is gonna sound really bad, so I'm gonna try to word it as best as I can. Our family was like a 4 was really great, but like with 5, I think it just feels more complete. Like
good.
To me, it just feels more complete,
No,
and it just makes so much more sense in my head. I'm like, wow, like this is what we were missing, and like I didn't know that. Yeah, and it was just a really hard loss on all of us, like just losing Susan, and just the last thing I kind of just want to talk about, like specifically talking about like their mom. I want to talk about your mom. You mention her a lot of times throughout the book because you know it's your mom, and I know she kind of has strong opinions on like some things and some stories. She just really cares a lot about different things. How was that process like of like telling her like, hey, I'm gonna write this book and I'm gonna let a large amount of people into this amount of our lives? Because I think for her too, it was like kind of like a shock, but like not in a bad way.
Yeah.
It was just like something different, something new that she didn't experience.
Yeah, I would say that I, looking back, like I realized that I had inherited the private life, kind of spirit. Like I feel like my mom was really used to just not sharing all the hard things that she had walked through, and was very private. So whenever she would meet people, they just had no idea the things that she had walked through, the things that she had really gotten through, and all the things, right? And I inherited that. I feel like that was like, oh, that's working for my mom, so let me do that, right, as an adult. And it was hard. It was hard for her, I think, to realize that I was in a different space when I was writing this book, and I was ready to tell the world all my sins and all the things that I learned, through this journey with God. And yeah, it was hard for her, but at the same time, like the other day when she came during the holidays, she was listening to the audio because I have the intro for free on my website, and she was just listening to it while we were having lunch all together, and was just crying, like she was bawling, crying, and I was like, okay, Lord, this is what this book was for. Like this book was not for me, but it was for the healing of my family too, that would read this book, that would be touched, that would just realize that there's freedom that comes when we share our stories.
Yeah. That's such a good, like, note. Yeah. I think it definitely has been, like, healing on all of us. I think it also has just been a really fun experience. Like, we've never had anybody that's written a book, so it's just, like, really fun to talk about it. And to talk about it openly, because I feel like growing up, we didn't talk about things as openly. And I think now, too, for me, is a struggle to be like, I'm actually struggling.
Really quick, before our time finishes up here, what, as the star of the book, how do you feel?
How do I feel? I feel like a star.
Okay.
Okay. How do I feel? I've read through the book. I think it's kind of weird for me to see it through the lens of your eyes, because, like, I've lived it. And so, like, for me, it's just like it's a completely different experience than it is for you. So, like, the things that, like, I was just so unaware about, but I still had such a great childhood, it's just weird. It's just weird. That's the way I would describe it. But I think, too, like, just reading about it, I'm like, wow, God has just been so good. Like, just to everyone in our family. And he's just brought so much healing, like, not even, like, just through our, like, immediate family, but just, like, through your mom and through your sister and just, like, everyone, which I think is just so evident in our lives now. But, yeah. One final thing. What I always ask people at the end of this podcast, anybody, any guest, what is a piece of advice you would give to everybody, anybody? Doesn't matter. You can pick, like, a certain demographic, or it's up to you. Any piece of life advice. It doesn't have to pertain to ministry. It can just be anything.
Yeah, I would say the thing that I discovered was live every day like it's your last day. Wake up with the sense of, like, who am I going to talk to? Who can I be kind to? Who can I love on today? Just knowing that tomorrow's not promised, right? I think we realized that through the loss of my mother-in-law, and it was an eye-opener. Like, don't waste time. Don't waste your days. Like, love on people, talk to people, see them. Don't get caught up on the tasks and the things that you need to do, but, like, see people.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm Isabel Lisa, and I'm your host of the Not Off Limits podcast. This is my mom, Veronica. She was joining me today, but tune in for other videos that are coming soon. And yeah, bye.
Bye.